All right. So you ever find yourself, like in those situations where you just like can't help but want to point the finger?
Mm-mm.
Like, your coworker spills coffee all over your presentation notes like 5 minutes before the big meeting,
Huh.
or your best friend forgets your birthday again.
Oh, yeah. Happens all the
It's
time.
like human nature, right?
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to be diving into a concept that flips that whole blame game like on its head.
Really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So what's so fascinating here is this idea comes from Sufism,
Okay.
which is this like mystical branch of Islam
Right.
that emphasizes this really deep inward journey toward truth and divine love.
Gotcha.
So it's really less about like outward rituals and more about like a personal experience of the divine.
I see.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're exploring this idea through a rule from the book, The 40 Rules of Love.
Okay.
And I'm going to read it to you here. It says, Rule 30, the true Sufi is such that even when he is unjustly accused, attacked, and condemned from all sides, he patiently endures, uttering not a single bad word about any of his critics.
Wow.
A Sufi never apportions blame.
Honestly, when I first read this,
Yeah.
I was floored.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a powerful statement.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really challenges like our default mode of thinking,
Yeah.
And it goes even deeper by asking this. How can there be opponents or rivals or even others
Right.
when there is no self in the first place?
Yeah.
How can there be anyone to blame when there's only one?
Okay, so like that no self part.
Right.
That's where I kind of get a little lost.
Yeah.
Help me understand this.
Yeah.
How can there be no self?
Yeah. So imagine like a drop of water
Okay.
falling into the ocean.
Uh-huh.
Does it retain its individuality?
Okay.
Or does it kind of like merge
Right.
and become like an inseparable part of something much greater?
So Sufism suggests that our individual sense of self,
Okay.
the me that we all kind of cling to,
Right.
is like that drop. It's an illusion.
Yeah.
It's like a temporary form in this much larger,
Right.
unified reality.
I see. So in that vast ocean of existence, where do blame and responsibility even fit in?
Yeah, that's a great question.
If we're all just drops in the same ocean, like, how can we even hold anyone accountable?
Right.
Like, doesn't this risk letting people off the hook for bad behavior?
Right. I think that's a question that arises a lot,
Right.
And I think the key here is that recognizing like the interconnectedness of everything
Okay.
doesn't negate individual actions or consequences, you know
Okay.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead, I think it shifts the focus.
Okay.
So instead of fixating on blame as like a way to isolate fault,
Mm-hmm.
we can see it as this opportunity
Okay.
to understand the complex web of like causes and effects that led to a particular situation.
So instead of saying like, he did this to me.
Right. It's more like it becomes more about
Yeah.
understanding how we're all part of like this intricate dance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So this understanding,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean condoning harmful action.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's not about saying that everything is okay,
Got it.
about recognizing that people act from a place of their own conditioning, their own experiences.
Wow.
And I think seeing through that illusion of like a separate self allows us to approach those really difficult situations with greater compassion and understanding
Okay.
without erasing like personal accountability.
Okay, so how do we actually apply this?
Right.
Like, this all sounds really great, like, in theory.
Yeah.
But in the heat of the moment, when someone, like, cuts you off in traffic
Right.
or forgets that, like, super important deadline,
Yeah.
how do you actually stop yourself from, like, having that knee-jerk reaction to blame?
Yeah, that's where like the real work begins, you know?
Yeah.
And Sufism, like many spiritual traditions,
Uh-huh.
emphasizes practices like meditation and mindfulness
Okay.
as ways to kind of chip away at that illusion of a separate self.
Gotcha.
And I think the more we connect with that inner stillness,
Okay.
the less reactive we become to those external events.
Uh-huh.
And we start to see that blame is often like a projection of our own inner turmoil.
So it's like that saying, like, holding on to anger
Exactly.
is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I think it's about recognizing that blame ultimately harms us
Right.
more than anyone else.
Uh-huh.
And it keeps us trapped
Okay.
in these cycles of anger
Yeah.
and resentment
Right.
and separation.
Yeah.
and embracing this Sufi perspective,
Right?
it's about cultivating a different way of being in the world.
Okay.
One rooted in understanding and compassion.
This has been like a really insightful deep dive.
Thank you.
You've given me a lot to think about.
I appreciate that.
It is a challenging perspective,
For sure.
but also incredibly liberating.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Yeah. So, listener, as you go about your day, consider this.
Yeah.
What if, instead of seeking someone to blame, you looked for, like, the connections,
Right.
the underlying causes and effects?
Yeah.
How might that change your interactions, your relationships,
Yeah.
even your own sense of self?
Absolutely.
Food for thought.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
of course. Thanks for having me.
And until next time, keep exploring.
Yeah, keep diving.
All right.
See ya.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.